Good evening, Soccerex Connected final day and final session in just a moment. Ben Jacobs with you after our last Soccerex Heritage session. We'll also have a look back on the day and we'll announce those winners of our signed shirts. Day 5 is brought to you by WSC Sports and La Liga, and Relevant Sports, specifically the International Champions Cup, have given us 2 outstanding prizes. A signed team Atletico Madrid shirt for the most engaged viewer. So you have to compete against each other and ask lots of questions in this panel. We're looking at how many sessions you've attended, how many network connections you've made on the app, and how engaged you are on social media. And whoever has the highest number wins that Atletico Madrid shirt. And I've got an Antoine Griezmann Barcelona jersey for you as well. What a prize that is. And all you've got to do to win it is tell me your most iconic La Liga jersey. Get creative. Go and take a photo of you and your kids or your dog wearing it. Go back in time, send us an embarrassing photo of you in a really old jersey when you were a kid. Put it on social media, Twitter specifically, at Soccerex. Use the hashtag SoccerXConnected, and you might well win that signed Antoine Griezmann Barcelona jersey, courtesy of La Liga and the ICC. We'll announce the winner in about 45 minutes' time on social media and live on air as well. So thanks for joining us here at Soccerex Connected. Let's head now to our final full panel of the day. For the next 45 minutes, we'll be focusing on Soccerex heritage and specifically looking at the 1930 World Cup through to the 100-year anniversary in 2030. In particular as well, we'll look at next tournaments on the cards: Qatar 2022, Australia 2023, and North America in 2026. We'll reflect on the history of the tournament in relation to the next generation of the competition. To do that, we have an outstanding panel. Delighted to welcome journalist and broadcaster Grant Wahl, who is the Football with Grant Wahl. Check out that podcast, some unbelievable guests over the last few months. Alongside him, Chris Nikou, the chairman of the Football Federation Australia. We welcome Lewis Castro, development manager at the AFA, and from Fox Sports Australia, sports presenter Stephanie Brantz. Nasser Khori is part of this panel as well. He's the director of programs at Generation Amazing, part of the Supreme Committee for Delivery and Legacy. And your moderator is a professor, no less, and the director of Eurasian Sport at the Eurasian Sport Industry. It's a very warm welcome, and over to Simon Chadwick.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you everybody who's listening to this today. Thank you to Stephanie, Luis, Grant, Chris, and Nasser for being here. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so I'm going to launch straight in so we maximise the time. Please do feel free to post questions, which we'll take at the end. If I could begin with you, Ben, and we talked about this last week when we were preparing to take us up to 22, 23, 26 and beyond. We thought we might start in 1994, which obviously is the thing to do when you're looking forwards. And I think you felt that there was something particularly significant about the period during 94 through to 2026, when of course the United States will have been involved in both tournaments. So can you give us a mazy dribble through midfield from 94 up to the current day, and give us your thoughts as to why US 94 is so significant in terms of what's coming?
Yeah, it's great to be on the panel with everyone. What I would say, and I started my professional career covering the sport of soccer in the mid-1990s, so I've been able to compare what it was like then in the United States to what it's like now and moving forward. And the 1994 Men's World Cup really did set the stage for a new era in the sport of soccer in the United States. And it's funny for me to think back to FIFA's concerns when they first awarded the World Cup to the United States in '94, that the stadiums wouldn't be full, that it would be a disaster, a failure. And what happened was essentially the opposite. Even though that was a 2014 World Cup, it's still the World Cup that has set the records currently for the number of fans in the stands at that World Cup, which I know is a point of pride here as we look forward to the next one on this continent. And that was really, the start of Major League Soccer, which started 2 years after that, which was a requirement of FIFA to start a Division I men's professional league. So in terms of legacy, there has been a real legacy, not just of the '94 Men's World Cup here, but the 1999 Women's World Cup here, which became this generational event that transcended sports and became a lot about women's empowerment, and was the story culturally in the United States of that entire summer in '99, and helped set up the start of a women's professional league in the United States. So we're in a different spot now, but we're here where we are thanks to that, what happened in the '90s. And I think when 26, the Men's World Cup comes to North America, the hope certainly is that the legacy is of taking the sport to the next level beyond.
And what about you, Stephanie? Do you share Grant's thoughts and views on that, or what do you see for USA between '94 and 2026?
Well, Simon, it's interesting that Grant mentions the 99ers, because exactly that first professional women's league was spawned from the success of that World Cup. They negotiated the first collective bargaining agreement, and they made the sport a viable career path for women, and it became less tokenism. That they created a juggernaut that eventually meant their popularity and their traction actually outstripped their male counterparts. And I draw on the similar opportunities for Australia in 2023, as we also exist in a country where the sports saturation is high, the competition for eyeballs is huge, but hosting a World Cup is a guaranteed way to get everyone on the bandwagon. And I just feel that once they're on board, you've got a 4-week window to ensure they never want to get off. And it's a chance to capitalise on that interest, to be ruthlessly commercial. And it just makes creating that legacy and how you treat that legacy, the goals and the tone, it's a really important window. As we say, for a World Cup, it's absolutely vital that when the show leaves town, the lights stay on. And Football Australia has a very clear plan for dealing with that. It's based around 5 pillars around leadership, community, participation, high performance, and of course, tourism, international relations. Some of those are self-fulfilling, but I think once you have the chance to create something like the 99ers and indeed the 94 men's generation in the US, you just have to grasp that with both hands. Of course, FIFA has a goal of 60 million female participants by 2026. Now, the game is growing exponentially, but you can't let that just be a byproduct of population growth and numbers and percentages. Events like the World Cup make an absolute clear-cut difference. And the more investment, the more professional the players, ergo, better standard, better product, and funding for female football becomes less the right thing to do and more a desired entity within a portfolio.
You can always tell when I'm interested during a webinar because I get my notepad out and a pen. So my notepad and pen has come out very, very early. So this is a good sign. Interestingly, both Grant and Stephanie, you both used the word legacy. We got there very, very quickly. And I think that neatly takes us through from 94 through to 2022. And Nasser, you just want to tell us a little bit about the role that you have with the Supreme Committee in Qatar, because I think it will help to really glue what Grant and Stephanie have just said very well.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. So my role with the Supreme Committee right now is basically I'm the programs director for Generation Amazing, which is a program that we run, and we started in the early stages of the bid for the World Cup in 2010. And the idea behind Generation Amazing is that we use football to positively impact lives of millions of youth in the region. So we started at the very early stages of the program. We built a couple of pitches for refugee camps in Lebanon, Jordan, Syria. At that time, the Arab Spring there was a lot of refugees in the region, and we decided to start with that. And then we created a program as well, where we trained coaches and communities. These, became Generation Amazing community coaches that basically ran programming on the pitches. So we kind of empowered people locally to kind of, run these safe spaces for the community, which I think it helped with a lot of issues that these kids faced. There's a lot of social issues that, they're under. Besides being refugees, there's a lot of other, a lot of social issues behind that as well. So I think football and sports generally is kind of a good way out of all that, everything they face on a daily basis. And on top of that, we embed different values different skill sets. We have curriculum that's aligned with UN SDGs, which we promote gender equality, social inclusion, a lot of these kind of characteristics that we embed in the students. In turn, we create a better generation. So that's kind of the idea behind Generation Amazing, and our aim is to reach 1 million beneficiaries globally by 2022.
Thank you, Nasser. And for those of us who perhaps are still unfamiliar with Qatar, and I think there probably are a lot of people around the world who are on the outside looking in and wondering how it's going to be, can you give us I guess really two things. Can you give us a progress report? How are things progressing in Qatar? But also, can you give us a sense of how significant the World Cup is for Qatar?
Yeah, sure. I think I'll start by answering. I think the latter question. I think the significance of the World Cup to the country, I think, has been huge, and I think the World Cup from the leadership's perspective here, the World Cup was always seen as a vehicle to kind of accelerate progress in society, so that the World Cup, if anything, helped the country build, the vision of the future. We have, a 2030 vision that, aligns also with 2022. So I think, from that perspective, there's been numerous, a lot of impact on society, whether it's on labor reforms, gender equality, a lot of other, sort of women in sports as well, generally is also another thing. And there's a lot of other outcomes as well.
So I think obviously the organisation that brings all of this together, the glue that sticks it all together, is of course FIFA and Luis. You've got a tournament coming up next year. From FIFA's side, what do you think we should be looking out for next year in 2022? What's the feeling inside FIFA about Qatar, and what do you think will be the if you like the distinctive elements of what's about to come?
Well, football ecosystem will continue to grow, and convinced that FIFA will improve after every edition, with better competitions, providing highly rewarding experience for the stakeholders. I look forward to seeing more attractive World Cups, which will allow us to join our beloved sport and continue to get known different places and the diverse cultures of this planet. I can only hope that with the strategy and vision that FIFA has adopted for the coming years, the competitions will continue to grow. The number of players, club, and professionals will increase, because football will expand in every aspect, level and discipline. All this will be able thanks to the strategic development programs which FIFA contributes to globally through our beautiful sport.
You used the phrase that attractive World Cups, and that allows me neatly to move across to Chris, because we talked in preparation for the event, Chris, about bidding and hosting decisions. Could you perhaps in very general terms, talk about what makes for an attractive World Cup, and can you then perhaps set that in the context for us of bidding and hosting decisions ultimately, because obviously you've recently been through this process, so kind of gently moving from 2022 into 2023. So what's an attractive World Cup, and what part of the bidding and hosting decisions play in that?
Thanks, Simon, and hi everyone. Can I just note it's 5 o'clock in the morning over here, and Stephanie and I are up, and I'm wearing a suit, just for the record. So
do you go to bed like that, Chris, or do you? Yeah,
that's my normal bedtime.
Right, okay.
Wear. Look, bidding for a World Cup is very intense, both labour-wise and in our case, we needed government support. So a long story short, we didn't have a great track record in bidding, so it took a little bit of courage to go again for the Women's World Cup. But I was interested in what Nasser said, because when he was talking about Qatar, the very first thing he said wasn't what they were doing in Qatar, but what they were actually doing by assisting countries in the Gulf states with infrastructure. And I think that's an important aspect, that it's not just about trying to get the tournament for your country, but what are you actually doing for the region and in advancing the sport more generally. And for us, with the joint bid with New Zealand, one of the key legacy issues was not just Australia, New Zealand, but the Asia Pac area, and how we would advance the cause of gender equality in the women's sport. So it wasn't a development tournament, but a fully fledged tournament in its own right. And there are a lot of initiatives outside of the football that advances football generally throughout the region. And I think that's very important to keep in mind.
Okay, and in terms of the Women's World Cup in 2023, and this is a general question for everybody really, is what can we expect, do you think, in 2023? Because I think even compared to 2019, and I'm sat in England now, and I think post 2019, it's as though women's football just got invented. And so suddenly this has been this huge explosion in interest and TV coverage and sponsorship. So Stephanie, what do you see in 2023 happening? And post 2023, what do you see happening around women's football and more generally the Women's World Cup?
Well, Simon, I see it as an enormous opportunity, because that growth in women's football has happened exponentially, and we see leagues like the Women's Super League in the UK, the NWSL, of course, in the US. They're strong, but it can still get better, and it's very important that the World Cup can be used as a springboard, because you get so many eyeballs and you get a chance to showcase the women's game. And as Nikou just mentioned, it's a cross-federation World Cup, and there's such a wealth of untapped talent across the Pacific in particular. It's a chance to not just share the collateral like knowledge and facilities, but to reach out a hand and bring everyone along, because a lot of the time we say, yes, women's football, great, it's isn't it wonderful to see the game progress? But in reality, I think there's still a long way to go, and a lot of that is based around funding. I know in Australia that our funding model is traditionally around the Olympic cycle, and I think that the way we perceive funding for the women's game must change. It needs to be stronger, more viable, perhaps less of a gulf between not just leagues and countries, but also within their own leagues. If you look at the Women's Super League, you've got teams at the top who have all the wealth. I know that it's not unique to the women's game. And then ones at the bottom who are struggling just to stay alive. And I think if we can bring everyone along together and create that proper investment in the game, and using that World Cup as an opportunity to do that, because proper investment benefits all the pillars of these legacy programs that we've already mentioned. And you get one cycle to strike. And I think 2023 needs to take the game that much further. I mean, there's many touch points, but I think the true legacy of a successful World Cup is what women's football will look like in that country, in that region in 5, 10, 20 years' time.
So you said it again, Stephanie. You said legacy again. So we'll come. No, it's okay. I know you're on a bonus for the number of times you mention it, so it's okay. We'll perhaps come back to legacy again in a moment. But I know one of the questions that people are really interested to know the answer to, and I go back to you, Luis, is could you give us a sense of what are the similarities and differences between organising a men's World Cup and organising a women's World Cup? Is it the same or is it different?
Well, there is a significant operational deployment for the organization of both World Cups. There is also a growing interest in the activity. And I believe that FIFA responded with facts regarding the commitment to the growth and development of women's football, which was evidenced by the remarkable organization of France 2019 World Cup. As we know, as everyone knows, the next World Cup will be in Australia and New Zealand and will mark new milestones in the history of women's football. It is excellent to know that it will be a competition with 32 participating member associations. And I understand that FIFA plans to double the number of the registered players by 2026. And by 2022, all member federations, without exception, will have a comprehensive football strategy. Another transcendental aspect for FIFA is the technical and management development. All of these concrete actions were designed to support a professionalization of women's football by improving club and leagues structures and providing help and support with outstanding programs such as FIFA Forward. In my opinion, the dreaming of equality is really important, and for this to happen, rights must be equalized from the most basic level. This allows us to hope in the future the women's football will be as attractive and lucrative as men's football.
Okay, thank you, Luis. Now we've kind of got stuck in 2023, so we need to propel ourselves forward again, Grant. We're obviously going to see one big change between 2022, 2023, and 2026, and you're going to have a whole lot more teams participating in the men's tournament in 2026. So really two things. Firstly, is that a good thing that we've got more teams? And secondly, can you talk us through, because I know there are some issues right now in United States, Mexico, Canada around host cities. And that's something you're grappling with at the moment. So as I say, firstly, what do you think? Bigger tournaments, is that good? Secondly, what does that mean in terms of choosing host cities?
You know, I'm sort of fascinated by the idea of having a 48-team men's World Cup in 2026. I like the idea of inclusiveness and that we're going to see countries get into that World Cup that have never been in a World Cup final tournament before. And so I like that idea. I think literally the world population has grown quite a bit in recent decades. And so I think it's reflective of that. Jury's still out for me a little bit on groups of 3 teams, but I've seen the plans and we'll see how it goes. And I do think that the knockout phase of that tournament is going to be a lot of fun. When you have that many teams in a tournament, you're going to see more World Cups, men's and women's, as the team numbers grow, be shared in terms of hosting duties. And so that's certainly what we're seeing with Australia and New Zealand for the women in 23, and what we're seeing with USA, Canada, and Mexico in 2026 on the men's side. And I'm looking forward to seeing what sort of combinations of host countries we might see for future World Cups. In terms of, what was your second question about?
My second question was about choosing host cities. Venues.
Yeah, I mean, like for Mexico and Canada, they're already set. They've got 3 host cities in each country. USA has a lot of work to do to narrow it down to 9 or 10. I think currently have something like 17 or 18 candidate cities, and the process has been slowed for bidding a little bit just because of the virus, but they announced a schedule, FIFA did recently, that is going to eventually come up with the host cities in the US. One nice thing, I think, is that we won't have to build any new stadiums for this World Cup, that the infrastructure and the facilities are in place in the United States already, as they are in Mexico and Canada. And so I personally like it when a country doesn't have to invest too much of its own money into building new facilities. And it depends on where a World Cup is around the world. I understand why Qatar is building a totally new infrastructure. That makes sense. For Brazil and South Africa and the World Cups that they hosted, I think there were some legitimate questions about whether that was an appropriate use of the money that was spent in those countries. And part of me sometimes, I brought this up on our one of our pre-calls, is there's a part of me that down the road wouldn't mind a country like Germany or France hosting every World Cup, just because I feel like those are good user experiences, and you are certainly not having to build new facilities and spend money on those types of things just for the tournament.
I was going to come to that. Grant Wahl says that all future World Cups should be held in Germany. Question but I'll leave that one for the audience to contemplate. Grant Wahl thinks that all future World Cups should be held in Germany. Discuss. I mean, hey, I'm an academic. 1,500 words by next Friday, if you could submit, please. Chris, from your perspective, you've bid for and been involved in the process of deciding where games will be hosted. I mean, what's your view from the inside on this? As tournaments get bigger and there are more teams, not just in the male game but in the female game too, what does this mean? You know, and kind of organizationally, managerially, logistically, what does this mean? Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, look, there's a greater level of complexity when you have multiple countries joining forces to host. So in our case, Australia and New Zealand, leading into the bidding, we had to have an MOU between the countries around content, around how we're going to approach FIFA, so we're not sort of falling over each other in the bidding phase. So we would meet actually weekly to go through these items. And then as the tournament goes, we were successful in securing it and we need to deliver it. It gets complicated because FIFA's contemplating effectively one entity in Australia, one in New Zealand, and an overarching umbrella to govern the two to deliver the tournament. So there is a greater level of complexity and you do need to stay disciplined. Our issue now will be locking in the host cities, and it's been complicated because of COVID. FIFA can't travel to physically inspect. And as we look forward, we've got obviously 3 countries hosting the Men's World Cup in 26, but the unique nature of 23 is it's a cross-confederation bid, which is the first time that it's happened. So I think that breaks ground. And as we look forward to 2030 and beyond, we talked about this again in one of our pre-calls, is it conceivable that a Morocco joins with a Portugal and say a Spain, which would be an interesting combination and break some ground. They're geographically quite close across 2 confederations. And as you go to 48 countries in the men's and you need more venues, that makes a lot of sense. So I think it opens up a new spectrum for tournaments going forward.
So do you think, Chris, that a kind of Euro 2020 across multiple cities in different parts of a continent, is this at all conceivable at any stage in the future, do you think, or is it a little whimsical?
Well, according to Grant, we're all going to Germany for the rest of our lives, so anything's possible in football, right? I think we've all learned that now.
Okay, so it's going to be either in lots and lots of different countries simultaneously, or it's going to be in Germany. Okay, so we're clear on that. Interestingly, obviously, Grant, I'm going to go to you, Nasser. Grant has talked about a situation where we've got 17 or 18 cities potentially hosting games or sharing games with 2 other countries. Of course, in Qatar, it's essentially going to be Doha, right? I know you've got Al Rayyan, which isn't really Doha, and you've got Al Wakra, which isn't really Doha, but it kind of is Doha. You're going to be able to visit all of those stadiums in very close proximity to one another. So can you talk us through, in terms of what Qatar foresees for the tournament? I mean, do you really see that fans will be going from stadium to stadium on a daily basis? And are there, for example, packages where you can buy bundles of match day tickets to go and see different games at the same time?
Yeah, so I think, because this is actually one of the legacy components of the World Cup Qatar 2022. This is, for the first time ever, this is the most compact tournament in the history of World Cups. It's a 60-kilometer radius between stadiums and the city capital, Doha. So I think, from that perspective, and with all the public transportation and the metro now that is kind of, being completed as well, that connects all the stadiums together and different parts of the city. So I think it's very easy, it's very doable. The travel distance is it's not like the last World Cup in Russia where people had to get on a flight to get to city to another. I mean, this is going to be a very different experience.
One of the other questions, Nasser, that I'm sure many people will want to ask, and I know I'm kind of chronologically confused. I've gone back in time again now. We will propel forwards again in a moment. But we heard initially, once Qatar had been awarded the tournament, that initially stadiums would be dismantled and shared with other countries. Is that still the plan? And if so, what is happening right now?
Yeah, so again, that's one of the legacy components of the World Cup as well is that Qatar doesn't need these mini stadiums and at this capacity as well. So a lot of the stadiums, when they were designed, there was a lot of consideration taken in by the community members that surrounded that area. So a lot of community members, for example, wanted facilities for the community, like a public sort of school, a nursery, etc. So that was all taken into consideration. So all the stadiums have legacy plans post 2022. Some stadiums are going to have hotels, some stadiums are going to be shopping malls, some stadiums are going to be converted into schools, etc. So that's another kind of very interesting element. That we're not going to have any of these white elephants like a lot of other countries witnessed post tournaments. And again, there's different plans right now to kind of also recover some of the revenues from these stadiums in terms of turning some of the spaces into commercial use for the community as well. So there's a lot of different plans. And in terms of capacity, the stadiums are going to go down. So the stadiums that are at 40,000 seats, let's say, are going to go down to 20,000, and then those upper tiers of the stadiums are going to be donated to countries. Again, this is a partnership and a project that we're going to work on with FIFA in terms of what countries they end up being in. But that's also the plan, is that a lot of the upper tiers of the stadiums are going to go down, and they're going to be donated to countries that need infrastructure.
Okay, thank you, Nasser. I'm going to fast forward again back to 2026, and as we've already said, Luis, we're going to 48 teams. That's a much bigger tournament, and I can remember tournaments that were considerably smaller than that. Can you tell us from FIFA's perspective, Luis, why was the decision taken to increase the size of the tournament to 48 teams, and what are some of the issues and challenges that you face in organising a tournament, including that number of teams?
Well, edition after edition, FIFA has demonstrated a continuous development and improvement process, exceeding the highest organizational standards and improving every aspect. This is reflected in the organization of each World Cup, with the synergy between the host country, the organizer, and multidisciplinary teams that converge into the organization and effective delivery of the World Cup. My feelings and sensations are really positive to increase the number of participating member associations as the 48. It will be a tremendous impact worldwide. Imagine FIFA has 211 member associations, and you will have 48 member associations playing the World Cup. That will help us to achieve the goal of Mr. Infantino and FIFA's goal, which is to make the football truly global. You will have almost a quarter of the member associations playing the best competition in the world. That is an amazing, it's a tremendous challenge, not only for FIFA, for all the stakeholders. That's why I believe and I assume that the football ecosystem will continue to grow, and it's really needed. That means we have a promising future ahead.
There's a question coming from the audience, which I'll come to in a moment, but can I just go to Chris and to Stephanie, and obviously Australia and New Zealand 2023, but looking forward to 2027 and the Women's World Cup. I'm just looking, we have bids from Belgium, Germany, Netherlands, Chile, Italy, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, South Africa, United States. Where is your money going? Where do you think the World Cup will head in 2027? Stephanie, any ideas? Chris, any ideas? Maybe it should be just Germany, full stop.
Germany, everything.
Exactly, but my parents are Dutch, so can I be a little bit biased and go for a Benelux combination? Just next door to Germany, small enough to get around, and yeah, I could see it going to Europe for the next one.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting that you say that, because we've talked already about Qatar and how easy it is to get around. But if you're thinking about Eindhoven and Dortmund, and the distances between these cities is actually relatively small.
Simon, it's something that you touched on before with perhaps, and Lewis mentioned the expansion. I think it's important that we remember we are spreading the football love, but I feel that a World Cup is something that needs to stay somewhat exclusive. It's your showpiece event, and it must be an achievement to get there. And particularly, we've got to remember that in the women's game, it's not a development tournament. It's your elite showpiece event, and you only get that chance once every 4 years. And on top of that, it's a chance for these cities and countries to have people explore them, because I've been in football media for some 21 years now, showing my age. And for me, when I go to a World Cup to cover it, I turn half fan as well as a journalist, and it's a chance to explore places that you would never have perhaps seen before. So well, hand on heart, I would love to see it go back to Europe for the Women's World Cup. There's an opportunity here for perhaps some other countries that maybe haven't been explored in that context yet.
I mean, can I just make that plea on behalf of all Europeans? Don't forget about us. I know that we kind of dominated for a while, but don't forget about us. Chris, you got a sense of where 2027 might go?
I think FIFA's thinking will be that it's not a development tournament. That was evident with the way we were successful. So the country that best positions itself to continue what the US started, but the France took to another level, what hopefully Australia, New Zealand takes to another level again. And the bid that best aligns with FIFA's ambitions in the women's game, I think that will be the successful bid. And so certainly Europe can do that. I've got a bit of a soft spot for the South Americans, but somewhere in between there. The US have had their share. Sorry, Grant.
So can I just follow up on that, Chris? Would you say that we now live in an era of bids with purpose? So I'm sure in times past there have been certain countries that for reasons of vanity or otherwise may have bid. But do you think we firmly are now bidding there? There has to be a purpose behind bids.
I think my experience has been that part of FIFA's thinking is, what are we leaving behind? What is this bid actually doing? It's not about just having a great tournament and then that's it. So, and we've spoken about legacy, but it's about football development to all corners of the globe. So I think that is important going forward.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Nasser, I'm glad you're back, because we do have a question from the audience, which is, would you share with us how Qatar intends to have women's football in a healthier, stronger place after the 2022 World Cup? So it's about women's football in Qatar and what's going to happen from 2022 onwards.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of plans at the moment for women in Qatar in football. There's plans of starting even a leagues, like each club has a women's team as well. That's a conversation and kind of is led at the moment by the Qatar Football Association. But the national team is there's plans also for a national team to be in place and to compete on a global scale. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting programs as well that have again part of the legacy. We have a lot of grown grassroots programs that came out locally here, in Qatar as well, to promote women and kind of encouraging young girls to play football, and so there's a lot of also for the Qatar national team. I mean, for the men's team, going back to what Chris was saying about development of football, I think the Qatar national team has done amazing in terms of over the last couple of years, in terms of becoming the Asian football champions in 2019, and there's a lot of different milestones that they've been hitting over the last couple of years, and I think that's because of all the investment in sports that the country has been doing over the last couple of decades. There's the Aspire Academy, which is a sports excellence academy, which this whole national team came out of as one team. And honestly, I'm sure, Simon, you've seen some of the matches, but this is a very sort of interesting team that I think has a very bright future ahead of it. Itself.
So yeah, I've seen some of your Qatari male players, and I know some of the things that are happening with your female players as well. So it is interesting. The great news is for everybody, or maybe it's bad news, I don't know, that the organizer forgot to press the timer on this session. So we've actually got longer than we realised. So we're still going. For me, that's brilliant. We can just talk about football for longer. But we will have to finish at some stage. So for those who are listening to this, please do send your questions in. We will make some time available. We've got about 10 minutes left. So whilst you think about what you would like to ask our panel, we're going to go one step further on to 2030. 2030, 100 years since the first World Cup. For those of you who remember the 1930s, which I just vaguely remember them, I was a young boy back then. But Luis, I'll come to you. 2030. Tell us about how important this is for FIFA and what a centenary tournament will mean.
It's not only for FIFA. It's a global celebration. It's a truly global celebration. Everyone will attend a centenarian's World Cup. That is something that all the people who love the sport will have a great joy to live that. It's one time in your lifetime. It's something really unique, and I assume that a lot of countries will be involved to try to host in a bidding process, because this will mark the 100 years of the first edition. It's something really unique. It's something really beautiful to live. And if we are thinking and talking about the 48 participating member associations into the World Cup in 2026, we presume that it will be the second edition with this number of teams involved, and that will, from the organizational perspective, will bring a lot of challenge to FIFA. But again, as I say, FIFA it's under a continuing growing process, as well as all the football ecosystem, and I'm convinced that FIFA will improve and will deliver a great World Cup, which is an amazing moment for the world and for all the football lovers or fans.
Grant, I know you're a romantic kind of guy. Apart from that Germanic streak in you, you're a romantic kind of guy. So Uruguay, right? For 2030, or
I was actually going to use the word romantic. Argentina is my adopted country, so I would love to see Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay co-host a wonderful Centenario World Cup and play games at the Estadio Centenario in Uruguay.
It is.
I also don't know how realistic in the end that'll be. We'll see. I actually did some research after our last call and shared with you that, just for our viewers to know, that China would be allowed under current FIFA rules to bid to host the Men's World Cup in 2030, that the rotation system is no longer in place. The only real rule at FIFA is that a confederation cannot host 2 consecutive World Cups. So Asia has 2022, North America, CONCACAF has 26. So I think China's the favorite, just personally, for 2030. And I think there's a lot of ambition there. If you look at the FIFA sponsors these days, a lot of those are Chinese companies. And I think having a Men's World Cup in China would be really interesting. It's probably time that they got that opportunity. But I do hope we'll get multiple good bids. I also learned that the sort of timeline for FIFA on that is second quarter of 2022 for bids, and then they're planning to announce the host at the Congress for FIFA in 2024. So it's not that far away.
So China then, right, Stephanie, for 2030?
Sorry, I share the romance of the idea of a Uruguay World Cup for the centenary. I mean, they were, I believe FIFA awarded them that World Cup initially because it was the centenary of their constitution celebration. So I think that's just a lovely synergy. And we are talking heritage. It's a nod to our past. And yeah, sorry, that is just the romantic in me. Maybe it wouldn't work.
Come on, Chris, you're in Australia. What about the British? Surely.
For the centenary or maybe down the track, Simon? Sorry to disagree.
Maybe down the track, not for the centenary.
There is a bit of romance about going back to Uruguay and those countries. It goes full circle. It gives us a chance to celebrate 100 years of the sport and humanity, I think. Lots happened in 100 years. So that's the sentimental part. If it wasn't there, I think China will mount a strong case. I know from the AFC, there's great interest from the ASEAN sub-confederation, which Australia is a part of. This joint hosting concept, so countries like Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia are certainly interested. Maybe 2030 is not their time, but maybe down the track. Taking it back to the home of football, Simon, I can certainly understand the narrative of football's coming home, the old catch cry from '96. The heart says South America.
Thank you, Nasser. We've got 45 seconds left. Nasser.
I would say China.
China.
Yeah.
Okay. So China it is then, unless it's Germany, of course, Grant. Can I just say that? Can I just say at that point to everybody, Chris, Stephanie, thank you for getting out of bed so early for this. My heart goes out to you. Nasser, thank you very much as well, because I know it's getting into the evening. Grant, Luis, great to have you with us. I'm counting down the timer, 15 seconds, 14 seconds. We didn't get any questions, which is a pity. With such great speakers and such a, I feel anyway, such a great topic to talk about. I wish we'd have more questions, but you know where to find us, audience. So back to the studio.